looking for fraud and identifying fraud, data analytics takes us pretty far. It identifies what we refer to as red flags or anomalies in the data, but you can't really stop there. You do have to pursue those red flags with human analysis because not every red flag signifies fraud. There could be a very common reason for the red flag or anomaly, and the only way you can really drill down and find the reason is through the human follow-up. It's interesting. Right now what we see is a lot of the larger companies are really thoroughly using data analytics. I work more with the small and medium-sized businesses, and some of them have yet to really dive into it. A lot of it takes a business investment into the technology needed to do data analytics, or maybe it's just a skill set the employees don't currently have. There has been an identification a long time ago of the fraud triangle. Donald Cressy came out with it a long time ago, and it still holds true today. And there are three components. First, there's usually some type of financial pressure involved, where the individual may have a gambling problem, drug or alcohol addiction, or sometimes it's some type of medical expenditure that they incur, some reason where they just need some extra money. And they can't find that through a legitimate source. The next piece is rationalization, because most of these people aren't necessarily criminals, or at least they wouldn't identify themselves as a criminal, at least as we think of one. So they need to look at themselves in the mirror at the end of the day, and that's where the rationalization comes into play. So sometimes it's as simple as my boss doesn't treat me fairly, they deserve it, I'll pay it back is a really common rationalization for fraud. And those are two pieces we don't have a lot of control over as management of a company. What we do have control over is the opportunity side of the triangle, and that involves having decent controls in place to prevent somebody from being able to steal money. A lot of times we start just by gathering a lot of data. It can be a little overwhelming. So when we're planning our data analytics, the first step is usually to take a step back and decide what we want to do and what we want to look for. Part of that, at least how I find it easiest to approach, is to think about it as a brainstorming session and say, okay, what could go wrong? So some examples are, if an employee was going to add themselves to the vendor system and pay themselves, how would they do it? If management wanted to misstate the financial statements, how would they do it? And that really allows us to identify the patterns that we would be looking for in the data analytics analysis. I work with small and medium-sized businesses mostly, so we haven't delved into the AI and machine learning capabilities of computers and analytics. So we've more focused on some of the basic techniques, things that can be done in Microsoft Excel, or very simple tasks that would allow you to look for fraud in a more simpler form. In the long run, I think that is where we're going, the AI and machine learning. We're just not there yet, at least at the small company scale. Some of the large companies are already delving into that though, and it's quite fascinating. One of the more fascinating data analytics techniques we've discovered is called Benford's law analysis. So on the face of things, if you think about a group of numbers, a data set, you would assume that the first digit of all numbers would occur equally. In other words, about 1 in 9 times, or 11%. It's actually not true. And it was discovered a long time ago by looking at, if you remember the days before calculators, to do logarithms and calculus, you had big logarithm books. They discovered that when they turned the pages, the 1 pages were a lot more worn than the 2s, 3s, and up to 9. So once they analyzed these patterns and performed the analysis across multiple data sets, what they discovered was that in reality, a 1 occurs as the first digit of a number about 30% of the time, a 2 about 18%, and so on down to a 9. It actually represents a curve. So what we can do is plot a set of data numbers against this expectation of a curve, and things tend to spike when somebody's committing fraud because most people don't know about Benford's law. And it's actually human nature, if you're making up numbers to commit fraud, to select numbers like a 5, a 6, an 8 as your first digit. So it's actually, I've always found it quite fascinating that we can use something like that that's been around for 100 years and use it as fraud detection. They've actually found it works for lengths of rivers, population statistics, basically any data set of natural numbers. So that's one area I find absolutely fascinating.